few years ago, before I left for college, I was still living at home with my parents. During those final years at home, we moved into a new house far from the city, nestled deep in the woods, and a bit of a mansion in my eyes. Despite it being just the three of us, we often had family over, which I think justified my parents' decision to buy a house much larger than we truly needed. This place felt isolated, tucked away in the woods with nothing but the trees surrounding it. It was a beautiful, grand home, but the emptiness of it made me feel uneasy at times. It wasn't long before my parents planned a trip to visit the rest of the family, and while they offered for me to come along, I stayed behind. I didn't want to miss a week of school, plus I had to catch up on work, so I decided to keep watch over the house. From the moment we moved in, I realized something strange about the house. I didn't like being alone in it. The size of the place, the long hallways, and the numerous empty rooms created a constant feeling of discomfort. The house, built over a century ago, had an eerie atmosphere. Although I tried to ignore it, that unsettling feeling never fully disappeared. The first 2 days of being alone went by smoothly. I went to school, hung out with friends, and chilled at home. But on the third day, something shifted. I went through my usual routine: school and dinner with friends, and didn't return home until around 6 or 7 in the evening. By that time, it was already dark, and I was exhausted, ready to crawl into bed for the night. I walked into the house, dropped my school things by the door, and headed upstairs. As soon as I glanced down the long hallway on the second floor, I noticed something strange. One of the spare bedroom doors was wide open. At first, I didn't think much of it, but that familiar sense of unease crept back. I walked down the hallway, looked inside, and saw that the room was empty, with only a bed and some random pieces of furniture. I closed the door, but that lingering discomfort stayed with me. What bothered me was that my room was at the very end of that hallway, and I passed by these doors multiple times a day. How could I have missed seeing this door open earlier? It felt off. The last thing I wanted was to walk past all those open doors, so I always made sure to keep them shut. I did a quick walkthrough of the house, nothing thorough, just checking that everything was as it should be. After seeing nothing out of the ordinary, I chalked it up to maybe just not noticing the door before, or perhaps it had somehow opened on its own while I was out. Still, that eerie feeling lingered as I made my way back to my room, turning on the TV in an attempt to calm myself. But it didn't help. An hour passed, and my stomach started to growl. I decided to head downstairs for dinner. One thing about living in a house this large was that not all the lights were ever on. I found myself walking through dark rooms, shadows lurking everywhere. While in the kitchen, I kept seeing things move in the living room, but every time I looked up, the room was empty. I thought I was losing my mind. The house was getting to me, and I didn't want to admit how anxious I was becoming. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination running wild. After finishing dinner, I made my way back upstairs. But when I reached the top of the stairs, I froze. The spare bedroom door was open again. This time, a chill ran down my spine. How was this happening? I stared at the dark hallway for what felt like an eternity, questioning what was going on. I never believed in ghosts or haunted places, but that was before I spent time in a creepy, century-old mansion deep in the woods. I crept back down the hallway, quietly pushing the door open again. The room looked exactly as it had before. Nothing was out of place. Still, the feeling of unease only grew. I stepped back and locked my door behind me. My mind raced, and I decided to text my parents about the door. I didn't want to sound too freaked out, but I had to ask if they had noticed anything unusual. They quickly responded, saying they hadn't seen anything and weren't sure what I was talking about. I tried to brush it off and assured them it was probably nothing, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. It was like my gut was screaming at me. This house wasn't as empty as it seemed. I had been sitting in my room, eating and watching TV, for about 10 minutes when I suddenly heard what sounded exactly like footsteps in the hallway. My heart skipped a beat as I quickly grabbed the remote and paused the TV, hoping to catch whatever it was. Just as the sound of footsteps faded, I heard a distinct thump right outside my bedroom door. Panic hit me instantly. My heart raced as I sat frozen in place, dreading what was coming next. The house fell completely silent, every nerve in my body on edge. The silence was deafening, so much so that I was too scared to even move. And then, in the quiet darkness, I heard it. Soft, slow knock. Someone was gently tapping on the other side of my door. My mind raced. I couldn't believe this was happening. I felt paralyzed, unsure of how to react to something so surreal. The knocking paused, not making a sound for what felt like an eternity. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I called out, "Who's out there?" I've already called the cops. It was a lie, of course, but I hoped it would scare them off. The truth was, I hadn't called the cops yet. I knew it would take at least 10 to 15 minutes for them to arrive, and I was alone in this huge, empty house with no way of knowing who was on the other side of that door. My pulse quickened as I waited for a response, but all I got were 3 more knocks, still slow and deliberate, like they were savoring the fear they were causing. That was it. I had no choice but to call the police. I grabbed the phone and gave them my address, trying to stay calm as I described the situation. Just as I was explaining that the person was still standing outside my bedroom door, I heard a loud, awful scratching sound against the wood. It was as if something sharp was being dragged across the door. A slow, deliberate scrape that sent chills down my spine. Panic set in as I begged the operator to hurry. The door handle started to rattle violently, and I thought my heart would stop. Thank God I had locked it earlier. Another minute passed before I heard 3 more knocks, and then silence. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, waiting for the police to arrive. It was the longest 10 minutes of my life. When the cops finally showed up, the hallway was empty. There was no one outside my door. But when they checked the door, they found something horrifying: a long, deep gash, clearly made with a knife, carved into the backside of the door. The officers scoured the house, trying to figure out how the intruder could have gotten in, but the house was a labyrinth of entrances and windows, many of which had old, unreliable locks. Despite their efforts, there were no real leads. My parents rushed back home as soon as they could, but even with them there, the house never felt safe again. The eerie feeling in the dark hallways and empty rooms was overwhelming, and the woods surrounding the house felt more like a trap than a peaceful forest. A week after the incident, I could have sworn I saw someone standing in the woods just outside my window. It was dark, so maybe it was just a shadow, but the fear that something or someone was still watching never really left me. Thankfully, I don't live there anymore. My parents sold the house a couple of months ago, and whatever was going on with that place, whoever was stalking us, will remain a mystery forever. It was just another typical Friday night for me. I lived alone in a small house in the suburbs, about an hour away from the city. After a long week of work, I was excited to have a low-key evening. The plan was simple: relax, watch some YouTube, play video games, and maybe even sleep in the next day. I took a quick shower after getting home, fired up my PlayStation, and started gaming for a few hours. A couple of beers to wind down seemed like the perfect addition to the night. As the night went on, I thought everything was going great. The only thing that could make it better was some pizza. I ordered from a local pizza place using their app, leaned back on the couch, and let YouTube play on the TV while I waited for the delivery. About 45 minutes later, I realized it had been a while since I placed the order, and I hadn't received any texts letting me know the pizza was on the way. I pulled out my phone and checked the app. It simply said, "Sorry for the delay. Your order will be on the way soon." No big deal, I thought. I was planning on staying up late anyway. But as time passed, I started feeling more and more tired. Maybe the beers had gotten to me. Over the next 15 minutes, I slowly drifted off to sleep with the background noise of YouTube playing. Suddenly, I was jolted awake by the sound of the doorbell ringing repeatedly. I shot up from the couch, confused and disoriented, thinking, "Oh, the pizza delivery." I had no idea how long I'd been passed out or how long the delivery guy had been waiting at my door. I hurried to the front door, still groggy, and with a couple beers in me, I wasn't exactly steady on my feet. When I opened the door, I saw a man standing on the porch. "Sorry, I hope you weren't waiting long. How much do I owe you?" I said, still tired and a little confused. The guy seemed puzzled, looking at me like he wasn't sure what I was saying. I repeated myself, "For the pizzas? How much do I owe you?" That's when I realized something was wrong. This guy wasn't holding any pizza boxes. In fact, he wasn't holding anything at all. And he wasn't wearing any uniform either. He was dressed in dark jeans, a gray hoodie pulled up over his head, with his hands stuffed in his pockets. The guy didn't respond immediately, just standing there looking at me as if he was processing my question. After an awkward pause, he finally smiled and said, "Don't worry, the pizzas are still on the way." He stopped talking after that, just standing there staring at me, like what he said made perfect sense. At that point, I knew something was off, even though I was still groggy and a little tipsy. Why would he be standing at my door saying the pizzas were still on the way when he wasn't even holding any? But in my dazed state, I just said, "Okay." After another awkward silence, I closed the door, shaking my head, trying to process what had just happened. I rubbed my face, trying to clear the fogginess from my brain. What was so strange about that encounter? I tried to brush it off, figuring I was just overthinking things, especially since I hadn't been feeling 100% from the beer and lack of sleep. I turned on another video and settled back onto the couch, hoping to get back into the zone. But once again, I dozed off. This time, I woke up to a clicking sound. I wasn't sure what it was, but I knew I hadn't been asleep for long, only a few minutes, because the video was still running. I sat up and listened for any noise, expecting a knock or the doorbell again, but there was nothing. The clicking sound stopped, but my curiosity led me to check my phone for any updates on the pizza order. I opened the app, but what I saw left me confused. It was 4 a.m. I had placed the order at 11 p.m., and the pizza place had closed at 1 a.m. I checked the app again and saw the order had been delayed for an hour before being canceled. I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of it. Who was that at my door? I stumbled to the front door and looked through the peephole. There was no one there. I unlocked the door, realizing I hadn't locked it after the strange encounter earlier. As I opened the door, I saw nothing but the empty, quiet neighborhood. The night had grown cold and still. I was way too tired and tipsy to deal with this anymore, and with no answers in sight, I closed the door. But just as I was about to walk away, something stopped me dead in my tracks. I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was still out there, watching, and that nagging sense of unease wouldn't let me go. The sound, the distinct click of the doorframe locking into place, it was exactly what woke me up earlier. My blood ran cold as I realized the full scope of what had just happened. That eerie feeling I had from the moment the man appeared at my door was now crystal clear. I replayed the whole interaction in my mind, and it hit me he wasn't a delivery guy. He was just going along with the lie because I had mentioned pizza first. It made sense now, his confusion, his odd response, his lack of any pizza at all. But what were his real intentions? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that I had let this stranger into my life far too easily. Why would he lie about the pizza, and what was he really after? I looked back into the dark, quiet house, every instinct telling me to leave. The unease that gripped me was palpable, and it took everything in me not to bolt out of there right then. I crept back down the hallway, trying to reach my phone on the couch, hoping that somehow I had just imagined the whole thing. But then, in a heartbeat, I heard something shifting in the other room. My heart skipped a beat, and panic surged through me. I grabbed my phone, ran for the front door, and fled down the block without a second thought. I dialed 911, my hands shaking as I explained the situation as quickly as I could. The police arrived within minutes, but it still wasn't fast enough. The man was gone by the time they got there. I gave them everything, his description, what he had said, the details of everything that had happened. But that's all we had. No real leads, nothing to go on. As of now, it seems like that's where the case will stay, unless something else comes up that I still think about that night, constantly running the events over in my head, trying to make sense of it all. But the more I think about it, the more it seems like the cancellation of the pizza order was just a really strange coincidence. What I can't get over is the bigger question. Why was this guy at my door at 4 a.m., ringing my doorbell like that in the first place? What was his real intention? Looking back, I think he was likely scouting for an easy target, someone who lived alone, perhaps someone vulnerable. I was tired, drunk, and definitely not in the right state of mind. He could probably tell that, and he was looking for an opportunity to take advantage of it. I bet he waited outside, listening to see if I locked the door after answering it. Then, when I went back to sleep, he waited for the perfect moment. Had I not woken up, had I not realized what was going on, who knows what would have happened? That night could have ended very differently, and likely not in my favor.